four-time Emmy-nominated producer, Frank Pace,
and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor. Brought to you by We Can Coffee Company, manufacturer of freshly roasted premium coffee blends delivered directly to your door.
This week's guest, commander of the Apollo 15, one of the 4 living astronauts to walk on the moon, Colonel David Scott.
Welcome to a Mikamuka to Mike. Today is a unique day because it's just, what am I, the Mikamook? You're not supposed to be speaking. I'm the Mook, and Billy is going to be joining us remotely because he had a bit of a COVID scare. So we felt it would be better, in deference to my daughter's intending birth of her second child in November, that he stay away for 1 week. So he will be joining us shortly, along with Commander David Scott. Before we bring Commander Scott in, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Weekend Coffee Company. They deliver premium brands directly to your door. So with that, let's bring on Commander David Scott and my partner, Billy O'Connor. Hey, Commander, how are you?
I'm fine, Frank. How are you?
Good. How are you, Billy?
I'm hanging in there, Frank. I'm vertical and nothing hurts, so everything's good.
Good. Derek, can you just put those two up on camera? We don't need to see me on camera. Well, we're working on that. Commander Scott, I want to ask you a question. Your 3 flights into outer space, what was the most memorable aspect of any one of those trips?
That's a good question. You mean each of those or all of them together?
All of them together, and if there's a tie.
Everything, Frank. I mean, it was a great experience all the way across the board. I want to ask you, Commander, if you don't mind, as a test pilot, were you more apprehensive at any time as a test pilot than you were when you were doing the moon missions? Or never really apprehensive, Billy. Billy, I was never apprehensive. I was doing my job. I loved doing it. Really? That's remarkable. Yeah, I learned that from the day one. You know, I wanted to fly airplanes, so I flew airplanes. My dad flew airplanes, and I loved flying airplanes. So there's no apprehensive part of it, but it was a matter of training and preparation. It's interesting that you say that. I was a firefighter in the Bronx, and when we have a real bad job, the training kicks in. It's like we second guess ourselves sometimes later, like things we might have done during the heat of the moment. But it's the training. It's always the training, and it's just automatic when you're dealing with something of that magnitude. It's another step along the way, and the training was great. NASA did a superb job of getting us prepared and getting us comfortable in what we were doing. So we also had, I always like to add, 400,000 babysitters. So whenever something went wrong, we had these great engineers who love to find mistakes somewhere to fix them. So they're all watching everything. So I got 400,000 people behind me taking care of me. So not a bad deal. Still incredible acts of courage. Just I'm in awe speaking to you. It's just an honor. It really is a privilege. That's the other way around. I'm in awe speaking to you. I love your books. Well, thank you very much. That's great. That's great to hear. Really great to hear. You got Frank Pace straight along the track, didn't you?
Yes, he did. He straightened me out completely. He straightened me out completely. So let me ask you a question, Commander Scott. When you were the first man to drive on the moon, what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was something that came along with the job and our preparation, and the engineering was superb. The machine worked really well, quite surprisingly, because it was very complex, especially to get it out of the lunar module. But it worked great, and it became a natural mode of transportation once we got going.
And you drove an electric vehicle on the moon many years before Elon Musk.
Yeah, I always like to say he's a great guy. He's done a whole lot of things, but shoot, we beat him by 50 years.
For sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
how do you
Bill.
feel in general? I'm sorry. How do you feel in general about that, Commander? About civilians going into space now? Do you think it's a real good thing, or do you think the government should be behind this, or how do you feel about that?
About what specifically, Billy? What do you mean?
About civilians taking the initiative and going into space. Do you think it's a good thing overall?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing overall. A lot of different aspects to it. When you say going into space, there are many things going into space now. So, sure, I think it's good for education. It's good for technology, good for human experience. So it's a good thing. Let's keep going.
Well, do you think it's an overreach? Like when Kennedy first said we were going to put a man on the moon by the end of the century, not because it's easy, because it's hard. The unintended consequences of that was Silicon Valley and us leading the world and microelectronics. Was that intended consequences or unintended consequences? Do we know that was going to happen?
We always have surprises, but we learn by our surprises. And, we're expanding the frontier, not unlike Columbus or Lewis and Clark. Gee, they went out into the middle of nowhere for a long, long time. They did pretty well. So we just took the next step.
Remarkable.
The first time you went up in Gemini 8 with your partner, Neil Armstrong, were you more apprehensive? I think I know your answer to this. Were you more apprehensive on that flight than the other two?
Well, Frank, same story. I was never apprehensive. I could hardly wait to get off the blocks. I mean, just like athletes today, when the game starts or the race starts, they're ready to go. They want to go. So it's the same thing. We wanted to go. We're all set and worked well together. And there was no apprehension. It was sort of like, let's go.
Well, on that Gemini 8 flight, I think that Michael Collins, who later flew with Neil on Apollo 11, wrote that your selection to fly with Armstrong helped convince him that NASA knew what it was doing. Had you ever heard that before? It said he wrote that Scott's selection to fly with Armstrong helped convince him that NASA knew what it was doing.
Yeah, I guess I have to give Mike his opinion for whatever it was, but I think everybody got to fly in turn the way we went, and it all seemed to work out pretty well. We had a couple of real problems, but at the end of the day, we accomplished Kennedy's goal and even went further than that.
Speaking of Kennedy's goal, we were talking earlier in the day, Derek and I, that it took 60 years for it to go from the Wright brothers' flight to put a man on the moon. In 50-something years, 52 years later, we've hardly accomplished in space what was accomplished from 1919 to 1969. Why do you think that is?
I think it's just human progress and what we learn and how well we can apply what we learn. And technology has helped quite a bit. Take advantage of the technology, and then so everybody presses on and gets forward. And that's been going on since humans came out of the cave.
Okay, Commander, let me ask you a question that not related, but the sun has got
Taking over the room.
taken over the room. Is there any way to close the blinds on a window that's the sun's coming in through?
Oh, yeah, because it's so bright.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah. There we go.
That's good.
Much better.
Good. So you talked about your problems along the way. When Apollo 1, we had the tragedy that lost those 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. Do you feel that the Apollo 8 mission was key to everything going to the moon? Because if that hadn't gone off successfully, we might not have had Apollo flights beyond that.
The Gemini 8.
No, I meant Apollo. I know what I said.
I'm sorry.
Go again, Frank. I'm pretty familiar with that, but
Apollo 1. After the 3 astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee passed away, perished in a fire. Do you feel that the Apollo 7 flight was the most Apollo 8 flight was the most important flight in the Apollo history? Because had that failed, would America had the appetite to continue on the Apollo program?
I think everything after the fire, people pulled everything together and got organized, fixed up the problems, and went along on a very well-planned program. Apollo 8 was a good jump because there are a lot of reasons for that, one of which was a space race, the competition with the Soviet Union. Make sure we got there first, got there being around the moon, which they did. And then everything was a step-by-step progress after that.
But what I'm asking is, if Apollo 8 had failed, do you think that would have been if Apollo 8 had failed, do you think that would have, America would have the appetite to continue with the Apollo program? Do you think there would have been Apollo 9 or Apollo 10 or Apollo 11 if Apollo 8 had failed?
I could really speculate. You know, we had the fire and then we pressed on after the fire. If you say, what happens if Apollo 8 doesn't work, but how does it not work? You know, that's a complex question as well. But I think the confidence in the program at that time was such that we all thought it would work. I thought, the spacecraft, I knew that particular spacecraft very well, 103. It was a great spacecraft. It was well tested and well prepared. And, Borman, Lovell, and Anders, they were well tested and well prepared. And I couldn't have seen any reason why it wouldn't work. There's always the if it doesn't work. But what is the reason if the if is? What caused it not to work, whatever that means? You can't really speculate unless you find out, what caused it or what happened. So it's just sort of like we look everything as success oriented. All the missions were planned, thought out, that they're going to work. And if there's a problem on a mission, like I mentioned, we had 400,000 people watching for problems, and the problems occurred, and they took care of them. Probably Apollo 13 is probably the best example.
Right.
Nobody expected that to happen. Nobody knew what was going to be the solution. But when it did occur, all the right people got together and came up with a solution. So I think the whole program was success-oriented. If we had a problem, we'd give it to the smart guys, all 400,000 people, and they'd figure out how to make it work.
I love the way you said smart guys, the 400,000 smart guys. It's not like you guys weren't too smart yourselves. It's pretty remarkable. When you talk about problems, Apollo 15, when you guys had the moon buggy, that thing weighed close to 500 pounds. It was 460 pounds. And when you landed, with that additional 460 pounds, it kicked up a lot of moon dust. It caused you a big problem, right, Commander?
No, not really. When everybody landed, we got dust before we got down. At about 100 feet going down, you get dust, and you go, as you say, flying airplanes, you go in the gauges. So
you were blinded. You were totally blinded.
Yeah, totally, except for the instrumentation in the cockpit. And the cockpit was designed to look like and work like an airplane. So it was not unlike flying in the fog, if you will, right? You go to the gauges, you go to the instrument panel, and they're all very familiar instruments. The lunar module was designed to be an airplane in terms of how you fly it, right? So we just went in and flew it like we'd always flown in the fog.
So Apollo 15 was the first J mission, which emphasized scientific research. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was the first real scientific mission because we focused on the science. Having learned how to get to the moon successfully and back, why the next step was to do something that could be really productive. That's the science part of it. And the last three missions were focused on the science part, not just with the three of us, but also with the instrumentation and the extra cameras and things on board. I mean, there was a pack of good instruments on board and a pack of good instruments on the surface of the moon, so science-oriented, and it worked out pretty well.
So how did you prepare? You say you were well-trained when you got there. How did you prepare to go to the moon to do the geographical exploration? Did you go?
We prepare?
Yeah. How did you prepare? Did you go? Did you made a trip to Hawaii? Correct. You made a trip to the desert. How did you prepare to be on the moon?
Be on the moon. In other words, how did we prepare for the science?
Yeah. How did you prepare on Earth for when you got to the moon?
A lot of pieces to it, Frank, and a lot of preparation and planning to it. So we pretty much, and I go back to what Neil Armstrong taught me. You do everything on the Earth you can possibly do that you're going to do during flight. You try everything. And we knew we'd be 3 days on the moon, 3 nights of sleeping. So we tried to sleep in the lunar module on the Earth. That didn't work out too well because of 16G, but it was pretty nice on the moon at 16G.
And how did you prepare for the geological exploration? Did you go to Hawaii? You went to Hawaii, correct?
Yeah, most of it was in the field, which was a great experience for me because I had never really paid much attention to rocks, if you will. But once we got into the field with our favorite professor, Lee Silver, and my good friend now, Jim Head, our teachers, taught us how to be field geologists, which are really observers and investigators. And in preparation for Apollo 15, we actually had 17 3-day field trips all around the country to different geology formations and different types of surface features that we'd find on the moon. And that was great training. In fact, we all really enjoyed doing that. And I think it worked out pretty well. We found some pretty good stuff, if you will, which was the point of the mission.
Yes. So you go ahead, Billy.
Including the Genesis rock. Is it true, Commander? I had read that the youngest rock on the moon is older than any rock on the planet Earth. Is that true?
I haven't really checked that part of it, but probably not. Because I mean, the moon and the Earth were formed at about the same time. So certainly, the Earth has rocks or materials or minerals that are older or as old as those on the moon. They're just formed in a different way. They have the same basic chemistry, different mineralogy, makes the moon a little bit different. But on the other hand, they all began at about the same time, which is about 4.5 billion years ago, which is longer than I can even think of counting.
So the Genesis rock is between 4.5 to 5 billion years old. Is that correct?
What was the what?
The Genesis rock is between 4.5 to 5 billion years old.
Yeah, it's 4.1 to 4.5, something like that. Now, I haven't looked at the latest numbers, but they know now. But the analysis techniques, actually, the beauty of what we brought back is that NASA keeps a lot of that, and analysis techniques get better, and they can learn more as time goes on. So, yeah, it's a pretty old rock, pretty fun to find.
So let me ask you, when you got back in the lunar module for the first time after your first EVA, what were your thoughts? What did the moon what did the moon feel like? What did the moon smell like? What did the moon, I don't know what to say, taste like? But if you had moon dust on your suit, residual moon dust on your suit, what was all of that like? What color was the moon?
When we got back in, the first thing we did was to take our suits off. But before we could do that, we had to take care of all the dust and the dirt on the suits. And we actually put them in laundry bags. Then unzipped them and climbed out. And the next order of business was to tidy up the inside of the lunar module, do a debriefing. We weighed each of the rocks, and we talked to Houston and went through all the things that we'd done on the EVA, and then a little dinner, and then go to bed.
So did the moon appear to be a different color with no atmosphere than it did looking at it from Earth?
Dust or the moon itself?
Moon itself.
Well, we did find a green rock. We did find color, which we didn't expect to see. And we did find something that was green, which was sort of surprising at the time. But there again, you find it, you bring it back, and you let the scientists go to it. And as I probably mentioned to you, Frank, before, in one of the rocks, one of the green rocks we brought back, they found water. So we actually found the first water on the moon.
Commander, when you were talking about the dust clinging to your spacesuits, was it like volcanic ash? Did it actually cling to it? Did it stick to your suits? Or
pretty close, something between the volcanic ash that we see here and talcum powder. Very, very fine, very abrasive, sticks to the suit, gets into the suit. In fact, they could never clean the suits. They still have this sort of grimy gray color in them, light gray color, because the material is very different in terms of the very fine granules that you can see in an ultrafine microscope. Okay, they look like little hooks, the little grains in the lunar dust are very sharp, very abrasive, and they're all about the dust. Of course, it's about the same color. Get inside the lunar module, and it's dusty, hard to contain. That's one of the big problems they'll have in the future, is taking care of the dust. It gets in all the moving parts. After 3 days, when we're getting our connectors put together on the suit, connecting the hoses to the suit, you could feel it grinding, even though we washed them off every night. So it's very pervasive stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
And what doesn't that concern you with the moon buggy or the intricacies of your equipment? I mean, the dust that it kicked up, causing a major problem.
Yes, it does. Getting in the equipment is a major problem. It didn't stop us any. 3 days is not very long, but if you start thinking about longer term stays, it is going to be a major problem because it clogs things up. And the thing that we noticed, though, were the connectors on the suit. That's just the beginning, and that's just 3 days. But I think in the future, they're going to have other challenges to contain the dust. That'll be a problem.
So why don't you tell us a little about the Galileo experiment and what challenges you faced proving that?
Oh, our little Galileo experiment?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That was an afterthought. One of the things we like to do in preparing for the mission is to think about some other things that are not the pure science and the pure training we're doing. And we used to sit around at night in the crew quarters after dinner talking about what else would be interesting to people and what else can we add to make it a little more esoteric, a little less structured science and structured engineering. And my good friend Joe Allen, who was our Capcom on a mission, came up with an idea one night to do a little science on the moon, which was to try the hammer and the feather. And we had a hammer, the geology hammer, and through a good friend of mine, we got a falcon feather. And at the end of the mission, on a time available basis, we had a little bit of time. So I tried the hammer and the feather, and by golly, it worked. That's a fortunate thing.
Because you had one take, correct? You had one take, correct?
Oh yeah. Oh, Frank, you're a producer. Yeah.
Spoken like a true producer. Yeah. One take.
Just like a producer. Yeah. One try. One try, man. That's true. One try. So we didn't have time to do any more.
So, Commander, we have a few questions from our readers. So let's get to the first one. Is from a fellow by the name of Ken Borman, who's a retired airline pilot for United Airlines. He wanted to know when you attended the Air Force Test Pilot School in 1962, your commandant was the legendary Chuck Yeager, the first man to break the sound barrier, and a very colorful figure at that. What was he like?
Oh, he was a great guy. I really enjoyed him. He was commandant of the school, but I got to fly with him quite a bit, and he would be what the pilot asked, the smoothest stick in the world. I mean, he was just a great pilot, anticipated well, flew well, but a very nice guy, productive guy, a serious officer who ran the school very well. and everybody respected him, and it was a pleasure to be able to work for him.
Why wasn't a guy like Chuck Yeager considered for the first batch of astronauts, do you think? You think he was too old?
For the first what?
Selection for the first group of astronauts.
He didn't want to go.
Oh, that's
I
right.
think, as I understand it, he wanted to fly. And in the early days, that was a pretty big decision, especially somebody like Chuck Yeager. And, the movie did reasonably well, light stuff. But Chuck was a pilot's pilot, and the opportunities he had flying at the time were probably greater than would have been expected for the Mercury 7. So I think a lot of people had that decision to make. Do you stay with flying, which you love to do, or do you try the NASA at that time, the Mercury type spacecraft going into space, which is pretty much unknown? So that's another longer story on how the first 7 guys really got the spacecraft converted into something that would fly like an airplane, which put it more on a level of flying. So that's another interesting, strong story. But back to Chuck Yeager, I think he chose, at his time, the right path to stay with flying.
Okay, this next question is from Bill Rutherford of, believe it or not, Jacksonville, Florida. It said some astronauts noted that it would change their perspective on life when they returned from the moon. Did that happen to you? And if so, how?
No.
No?
Simple answer.
Life is what it is. I'm enjoying life. Had a good time doing that, and have a good time now.
Billy, do you have a question?
I got a quick question, because you mentioned the right stuff, and you mentioned Tom Wolfe's book. Did you like the book? Did you read it? What did you think of the movie? Did you think it was fairly accurate, or?
I thought it was really quite good. In fact, I got interviewed probably 2 or 3 times by Tom Wolfe in the process of that. Yeah, he's a very, very smart guy. Never took any notes. Asked really good questions. Went to lunch with him a 3 times. And he interviewed about everybody I know. But straightforward questions, and, he absorbed it all. And I think the book is really very good.
I think it was a terrific book as well. Was Wolfe in his characteristic flamboyant outfits? Did he have a white suit on? And
Always.
always.
Oh, yeah. He was always dressed to the top, I tell you.
So a follow-up question to that comes from Yesenia Guzman of California. She wants to know, what did you think of the movie First Man about Neil Armstrong? Was it accurate? How do you feel you were portrayed, and the way the NASA space program was portrayed?
Yeah, most unfortunately, that movie was terrible. Actually, I worked on it for 6 months, and they had some agenda that I'd never really understood. It didn't bring the culture out properly. It didn't bring Neil out properly. In fact, I think it was a sad thing for them to depict Neil as a person who was not a good pilot, who worried, was concerned, and distracted and all that, which he wasn't. Neil was a great pilot, straightforward guy, as most people saw him in real life. And it was unfortunate that the movie just did not do a good job.
Wow.
I have a question from one of our viewers, Commander. Her name is Undine De Filippo. And she asked a question that I guess is very controversial. But one of your comrades, Edgar Mitchell, was very outspoken about extraterrestrials and UFOs. And I'd love to get your impression of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Do you think it's...
Everybody's different, Billy. Edgar, I knew Edgar well. Another really great guy. He's a really good guy, a good friend of mine, but he had his ideas on what he liked to do and what he was interested in. Everybody went a different direction after the program. Look at Alan Bean. He was the first artist to go to the moon. When he got back, he went back into his art. He was a great painter. Got a lot of great stuff. So, everybody had a different direction to go. Ed had, noetic science, and that was his thing. I respect him for that. That was his opinion. So, okay, let him press on. Good guy, did a lot of good work.
But I mean, they're not debating the subject, but your own opinion on extraterrestrials, do you think it's valid that they are extraterrestrials?
Say again, Billy?
I'm sorry, do you think it's valid that there are extraterrestrials in your opinion?
I haven't seen any, Billy. So, you
All
know,
right, fair enough. I haven't either.
You are one, but you haven't seen any.
I haven't seen
you
that.
know, that's everybody. I get that question often. I just can't talk about it, Billy. You know these things. How they are.
Well, I'm sure if they're out there, they'd be trying to contact me, Commander. That's for sure. I'm
That'd
sure.
be a good contact.
Commander, what are your thoughts on ending the moon program in the 1970s? And why do you think we haven't been back?
Say it again, Frank. You're coming through weekly here.
What are your thoughts on the ending of the moon program in the 70s? And should it have, why do you think we haven't been back?
Well, I think basically it's hard to go to the moon. It's just very, very difficult. It takes a unique set of circumstances and a singular goal. Kennedy said, man, moon, 1970. Everybody understood that. We had a great culture at the time. It's a different culture today. And the way people work together was just magnificent. It was amazing to be part of that and to be able to watch how people did things and worked together, respected each other, trusted each other. We had heavy debates, hard debates, but when a boss made a decision, everybody rowed the boat in the same direction. So it was just a marvelous time, a marvelous culture, and NASA management was absolutely superb. I don't see that happening again. It's very, very difficult. Just the fundamental parts of going to the moon are difficult. You know, how do you navigate? How do you get out there? You just don't shoot the spacecraft and hope it hits the moon. You know, it's very complex. People understand it pretty well now, but to try and pull all these pieces together at the same time and get off on the same time with this magnificent machine, it's just very, very difficult. When you go back and look at the 60s, trying to pull all that together was a tough job. In fact, one of the really leading engineers of the time, Max Faget, used to say, we made it look too easy.
Whoa! Can you tell me about the computers of the 60s? How much more in depth are the computers now than what sent you to the moon in 1970?
How much more what, Frank?
Advanced. How much more advanced are the
Computers
today versus
Computers, yeah. Well, we got great computational capability now, much more than we did back then. You know, we had 36K in our computer, which is about one page. But again, very bright guys who could write brilliant software and put it all together so that it works. We have a lot more computational capability today, which is very valuable, especially in simulating off-nominal conditions and things like that. But again, it takes the people to make it work and takes the people to coordinate it and manage it. And I just don't see that happening right now. They're trying, bless them all, they're trying. There are a lot of great people. But again, it's very complex to put all these things together. You mentioned the suits and the dust. Somebody has to figure out how to take care of the suits and the dust. Somebody has to figure out how to make a rover again. You know, we had a brilliant rover. All these kind of things have to come together, and they have to come together on a schedule which is managed by, you know, superb managers, which we had.
So you would say then that a trip to Mars is out of the question.
Why do you want to go to Mars?
Well, I don't want to go to Mars, but why did I like to send Billy to Mars sometimes? But the government.
Frank, no, I wouldn't want you to go, Frank. I wouldn't want to lose you. No, but you know, there again, it's the same basic question as going to the moon. What's the reason to go to Mars? You have to have a reason. I mean, it's a great idea to go colonize Mars, but it's not a very nice place to live, and the resources aren't there. I think that's going to be difficult. The science part, we're doing very well with the science. Look at what's going on. They're flying a helicopter around Mars now. I mean, these guys that put all the robotics together are superb. So I think it's very difficult to justify the risk and the cost of sending humans.
What would the soonest be that we could go to Mars if they ever could get all of their political factions together? 20 years, 2040, 2060?
I don't think humans are going to go to Mars. That's my opinion. It's just there's no reason to go. And I've looked at that carefully. I've done presentations on it. And I asked the audience and I asked everybody, what is the reason to go? You know, exploration and humans and all that stuff. That's great. I like exploration. I think humans should explore. But you have to have a reason to support the cost of going and the risk of going. And of course, the politics.
You got to convince the public that it's worth going, right? That's the politics.
Yeah, tough.
And the politicians, no less, because the politicians now are never going to agree on anything. Republicans debate are on one side, Democrats are on the other side, and nobody's on the side of science.
That's not new. It's
Yeah.
just the extent, you know.
Let me ask you, Commander, when you with Apollo 15, one of the things that fascinated me was it's difficult enough in my simple mind to put an object on the moon. That's like incredible in my own mind to try and do it. But they really weren't doing that. They were aiming for specific parts of the moon. Like when you went with Apollo 15, you were designated to land at a specific site on the moon. And because of the dust and everything, you ended up on a crater. Can you tell me something about that? You ended up slanted almost.
Yeah, we had a specific site, but the photography at the time of the surface wasn't very good. We had about a 40-meter resolution, so you couldn't see much of the surface. And at the same time, the sun angle has to be exactly right to throw the shadows in the craters. So at our time, when we landed, the sun angle was planned to be about 12 degrees from the horizon, right? And if the slope of a crater was 11, there'd be no shadow. So you couldn't see the shadows in a slight crater. And the surface was much more irregular than I expected. In fact, where we landed, there's no flat place. There's no level place, which is another problem with some of the films today. You know, they make it look like the surface is flat. It's not flat. It's rolly and bumpy and cratered and boulders and very, very irregular. So when we landed, we landed at a tilt because I put 1 foot in a crater. I didn't see the crater, but it worked out all right. The lunar module was designed just right. It didn't affect the operations at all.
Wow, but you were actually tilted. Was there any danger of it toppling over, or did you think there might be a danger of that? Or
it wasn't tilted that much, but we did land. If you landed, in a hole, in a bigger crater, bigger hole, you'd have to leave if you were tilting too fast or going too far. But we didn't even notice the tilt. We finally, after we got down, everything was pretty much, again, you're in 1.6G. So you don't feel these heavy things, objects, and the tilting. We didn't feel it very much.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the fallen astronaut memorial that you guys left on the moon? The fallen astronaut memorial that you guys left on the moon.
Okay, what about it?
Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? You know about it, but can you tell our audience about it?
It's another part of preparing and recognizing our colleagues. About 3 or 4 weeks before we went on Apollo 15, the Soviets lost 3 cosmonauts. And that was a tragic loss. And we had already lost 4 or 5, 6 guys for problems. And we found that between the Soviets and ourselves, we all have common goals, common backgrounds, and we became quite good friends. So I thought it would be appropriate to try to recognize the contributions that all those guys had made who didn't get to go, and got my boss to approve of putting their names on a plaque and putting a little figurine on the moon to represent a fallen astronaut. Again, all on a time available basis. It took a couple of minutes to do that, but I thought it was meaningful because I wanted to recognize our fallen colleagues and their contributions on both sides of the space race. And it seemed to work out pretty well.
Right. That was a great thing you did, for sure.
Great gesture, especially when you think of the cosmonauts and yourself being, you're like one unit almost, even though you're different countries, it's A very select group of people.
I've met a lot of them, and I even wrote a book with one, and I find that they're the same we are. They're the same kind of guys. They were pilots. They were test pilots. They had the same aspirations we did. Yeah. And actually, when we got together, we had a pretty good time. It was a nice, what should I say, compatible competition.
And yeah, well, I'm sure you had a lot more in common with a cosmonaut than you'd have with a mook like me.
We'll have to talk more about that.
Well, speaking of a mook like Billy, why don't you tell us a little about the Vomit Comet?
About the what?
The Vomit Comet. The zero-G.
Oh, you mean the zero-G airplane?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's fun. I mean, that was another innovation that, well, the idea was in the early days to give you a sensation of weightlessness. And they converted an old, I forget, airport transport, into an airplane that could be flown in sort of a hilly way, up and down, such that at the top of the hill, as it goes up, it pushes its nose over and everybody floats for like 20 seconds in zero-G. And it's not only a good orientation training, but it's also useful in how you put things together and how you operate things, how you get in and out of a spacecraft, how you get in and out of a spacesuit. It was very useful training. And it was really quite fun to go out to, Disney World West and fly around in a zero-G airplane.
Well, Commander, I asked you before about being apprehensive, and you said you were never apprehensive, which is remarkable in itself. What was more juice for you? What was more fun? Was it more fun being a test pilot? Was it more fun going into space? Was it more,
You get right down to the core, don't you, Bill?
Yeah, I want to know the biggest rush. What was the biggest rush for you? Being a test pilot or going to the moon?
Being a fighter pilot in a frontline fighter squadron.
Really? That's unbelievable.
That's fun, man. That's fun. Going to the moon and flying a spacecraft, those were great fun, too. We did have a good time. We worked hard. We played hard. We had a good time. But in terms of my career, I got to be a fighter pilot in a frontline squadron for 4 years. I loved it. My dad
was fantastic.
My dad was a fighter pilot. I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. So I got to be a fighter pilot. I was lucky. On all the breaks, took all the right paths, right thing. And that was really fun. I didn't have to work hard. I got to play every day and they paid me.
Do you still fly? Do you still fly airplanes, or did you fly after that? Like just personally?
No, I don't fly anymore because there comes a point in your life where it's time to go do other kind of things. And not that I was ever apprehensive or scared, but I was in a management position. I was running the Flight Research Center at Edwards, and that took a lot of time, a lot of effort. And these days, the flying requirements in terms of test and checkout and all that, and the paperwork, they get pretty awesome after a while. And I decided I just didn't have time to do both. I had to move along in a career, so I hung them up. It was time to hang up and go do something else.
So let's move backwards. We know you graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point, but prior to West Point, you were a swimmer at Michigan. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was a swimmer. I got to swim, and I got to swim with a lot of good guys. I got a lot of breaks because that was a good sport. It got me into Michigan. Then I got to play water polo. I enjoyed that, and it was always sort of a off the ranch opportunity to do something that wasn't structured in school, So I enjoyed the swimming.
And then when you went to West Point, did you, I know your swimming coach was happy to get Scott from Michigan at West Point. Did you swim at West Point also?
Yeah, I swam at West Point, played water polo at West Point. Good diversion. Again, good camaraderie. And everybody has to do something at the academy. When I was there, you had to participate in some sport, intramural sport or varsity sport. And it was a good opportunity because I had some good background.
And You still hold, well, you held the 440-yard freestyle record at Michigan. Is that correct, your freshman year? And you were the captain also?
No, not at Michigan. You know, I did pretty well. I only swam 1 year at Michigan. And in those days, boy, Michigan was a top of the line school with a great coach named Matt Mann. And I went there because that was a great swimming team. But I was only a freshman there. I had a lot of good experiences, you know, and I hated to leave in a way, but I had an opportunity to go to West Point, and that was one of my goals too.
Well, when you're part of your astronaut training, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was training for weightlessness underwater. Your swimming must have came in handy then.
Say again, you training underwater?
Did you train underwater to simulate weightlessness?
No, I was before the underwater training, although I did go to the tank 2 times just to see if it would be useful. And it was, but it was the underwater training for Zero G came after my time in Gemini 8. And of course, it wasn't part of the mission for Apollo 9, nor was it for Apollo 15. But the underwater training for Zero G work is really great, and they do an excellent job now.
Billy?
Yeah, I got a question, Commander. When you were on the moon itself, the Earth rotates over 1,000 miles an hour on its axis. But when you're on the moon, you don't see it rotating the Earth, do you? Does it appear to be rotating, or do you see it?
It's just stable as if you're on the Earth. You don't feel any motion at all.
But you don't see it moving. There's no when you're on the moon.
No.
Remarkable.
Derek, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So, what are your thoughts on Jeff Bezos and Branson appearing to travel into space? Did you consider that space travel anything near what you did?
Not really. I mean, you mean the sort of the space travel going up in space now by Brandon and Bezos and all those fellows, right?
Yes.
Well, they don't have really. It's a ride. It's probably a pleasant ride. It may be quite challenging for some people, you know, because it's a different environment kind of thing. But I think it's a different world in terms of space travel. We had specific jobs to do, specific tasks on all my missions, and being in space was part of that. But I think today, some of the space travel is just to go up there and have the experience to look back at the Earth and look at the blue, black sky. I think that's if people want to do that, I think it's a great idea.
Would it be valid to compare what they're doing to like Yuri Gagarin's first flight, just going up and down? Would that be valid?
Not really, because of the time, because of the technology at the time, you know?
Uh-huh.
Boy, when Gagarin went up, that was absolutely remarkable, considering the technology and the really, in relative terms, crudeness of the spacecraft was brand new. We didn't know, they didn't know very much about what was going to go on. And actually, the physiology, the doctors were all concerned, even in the early days of Mercury and Gemini. You know, what's going to happen when you go up in space, if you will, and spend, 90 minutes or 90 days or whenever in a zero-G environment? What's going to happen to the body? What's physiologically going to happen and what's psychologically going to happen? In the early days of the Mercury flights, the psychologists and the psychiatrists were very concerned about what may happen when you get up there, In fact, even another interesting little story, when Ed White, who did our first EVA on Gemini 4, he was out for about 10 minutes and got back in. And there was a lot of concern that he had rapture of the deep. Like you go down deep into the ocean.
Nitrogen sarcosis.
And you don't want to go up. And people have that, rapture of the deep, nitrogen narcosis, right? Totally different problem. In zero G, you don't have any pressure. There's no pressure. So he didn't have anything like that. But on the other hand, at that time, there was speculation that that was affecting him. And then people found out as time went on that it doesn't affect very much. And now we know we've had, a couple people spend a year on a space station. Well, they're changed somewhat, but not dramatically. So it's just a learning process, an understanding process. When Gagarin went up, they didn't know anything about that, physiologically, psychologically, but we learned as we went on.
Very interesting.
So
Very interesting.
here's another question from Bill Rutherford. He said, tell me if you can hear me or not. After just hours in space, the Gemini spacecraft spun out of control. Describe how it happened, how much danger you were in, and what was the risk of blackout?
Well, that's a long story too, Frank, obviously. How it happened was
we've got time.
One of the thrusters on a Gemini spacecraft failed unexpectedly, failed on, off, on, off, on, off. Hard to determine inside the cockpit. We were at night. We're not over any ground stations. And actually the event, if you will, was off and on for about 25 minutes. We're on without getting too complicated, we're on our target spacecraft. We had docked with an Agena vehicle, which the ground told us had a problem. So we suspected that. We got off of the Agena and found out really it was a Gemini spacecraft problem. And it started a tumble, a roll, a high-speed roll. Fortunately, Mr. Armstrong, who's a very experienced test pilot, and he knows the details of a spacecraft on his side. He flew the Gemini. I flew the Agena, if you will. And Neil figured out our last option to turn on a smaller control system, smaller rocket engines to stop the tumble, and he got it stabilized. And then we came down safely. But I have to hand Mr. Armstrong for that, because the guy is a great pilot. He knows what he's doing. And I was very fortunate to fly with Mr. Armstrong that day.
Well, you're much too modest, because after the brief flight, you were assigned to an Apollo crew. You were also promoted to a lieutenant colonel for your efforts on Gemini 8. So that's just another thing. I got so many notes on you that it's crazy, but it's just another brilliant thing that you accomplished.
Go ahead, Frank. What's the question?
No, I didn't ask a question, but so now I will though. Can you tell me what you're doing at Brown and MIT currently?
What did I lecture? Oh, at Brown?
Yes.
Or MIT? Oh.
Either or.
Okay. Well, when I lectured at Brown, it was on geology, field geology. My good friend, Professor Jim Head, invited me over a number of years to speak to the freshman class and talk about the geology of the moon and the geology of the Earth. The other side of that, when I went to MIT and lectured, it was mostly on Apollo engineering. Professor Dave Mendel and John Talco has invited me a number of times to come to MIT and present a lecture, if you will, a story on Apollo engineering and how we worked in engineering, what the concepts were, how you would build, as an example, how you would build a lunar module today using the same basic design concept, but better technology that we have today, and what would it look like. And we worked with a graduate class for a while. Turned out you could build the same lunar module for almost half the weight. So those are interesting exercises, and I enjoyed the lectures. I especially enjoyed the students. They asked great questions today. They're really smart. And actually, I think I learned more by doing that than probably they did.
Wow.
I have a geology question for you. Now, bear in mind that as far as geology goes, I'd be happy enough to sweep the men's room at MIT. Never mind lecture at MIT. But my question is, I had read that there was a helium -3 rock that you guys had brought back that's possibly a clean energy source. Can you enlighten me a bit on that, Commander? Helium -3?
Yeah, there probably, and we would not recognize that in field geology observations, but it turns out that there is helium-3 in the lunar material, not very much of it, but you could mine helium-3, okay, and that would provide fuel for a fusion reactor, which would provide energy. So it's a long term, but my good friend Jack Schmidt, who flew on Apollo 17, wrote a whole book on that called Return to the Moon, but it's focused on, mining helium-3 and what you could do with helium-3. But that's a very, very long-term project, but it does show that there is some energy to be gained from the moon.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you put it in simplified terms for me to digest it.
That's all I know, Billy. Are you kidding? That's the limit, man.
Yeah, I got a lighter question. Do you watch sci-fi movies?
No, not very many. No, sometimes.
Not interesting at all. Just because you are the sci-fi, right?
No, actually, I've read a lot of sci-fi books.
Okay.
Bradbury, Heinlein,
Asimov,
and those. In fact, we used a lot of that to name the craters on the moon during Apollo 15. We'd sit around and talk about, because we had to drive a long way, naming craters rather than giving them numbers. Numbers are pretty boring. We give them names. So we one big crater that was quite spectacular we called Dune, after the book.
After the book, yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't seen many sci-fi movies. I think sometimes they take it a little further.
Right.
But, actually, that's a good question. Science fiction has been a major proponent or component of the true space travel and true science. A lot of the science fiction writers stimulated thought that became science fact.
Wow.
And I guess you'd include H.G. Wells among them, I would imagine.
Pardon me?
I imagine you would include H.G. Wells among them. The ones
H.G. Wells, yeah. Arthur Clarke. I knew Arthur Clarke pretty well. Yeah, in fact, he wrote a book called Earthlight, which is a great book, and it's almost the best description of Hadley Apennine, where we landed and explored. And it's about a little group of guys at Hadley on the moon, and it's called Earthlight, and it's a really good book. And I met him several times after the flight.
I'm going to read it. If you recommend it, I'm on it.
It's a good book. It's really good, yeah.
I want to ask. Actually, I would ask a favor of you for the future, the future of the country and the future of the kids' generation. Could you provide some sort of inspiration for kids, young scientists, to have interest in going back to the moon, like a greater interest than what we have now in going back to the moon, and also possibly exploring space as far as Mars and beyond? Would you be able to provide some sort of inspiration for that, just having been, accomplished so much yourself?
I think it's a great opportunity to learn about the moon and Mars, whether you go there or not, but still learning about that and learning about the solar system and the science and the geology and the astronomy and all the pieces that go to the universe. I think part of the benefits of human exploration of space is to stimulate young people to learn about it and become whatever they want to be, engineers, scientists, or whatever, and participate in it. Because it's pretty exciting to discover this stuff and go to places that have never been before. And you take, as an example now, the rover on Mars, a little helicopter on Mars, and what they're learning about not only Mars, but the rest of the solar system and the rest of the universe. And it's a great learning experience, and it's very challenging. So I think, the inspiration or stimulation to young people is to look at the science and the technology to develop these things. Like JPL does the rover work on Mars, and they're terrific. I mean, they figured out how to land on Mars, how to drive around on Mars, fly on Mars. That's pretty interesting and pretty exciting. So I think for the young people today to get into an area that is really inspirational, exciting, and challenging into the, quote, space world, which includes not only, geology, astronomy, and all the other aspects of the science that goes along. Look at, as another example, we brought this green rock that had little green spherules in it, and a professor at Brown University discovered the water with the new instruments they have now. So that's pretty exciting. I was up there shortly after he discovered it, took me to his lab and had about half a dozen students hanging around saying, wow, this is really cool. So I think the whole idea of exploring space, if you will, is pretty exciting, and it'd be a great place for people to get involved in their school days.
And your daughter Tracy is teaching a course at Emory University in space exploration as far as the moon is concerned. Is that right?
My daughter Tracy is a professor of sociology at Emory University, and she's starting a class next year on basically the culture and how all of Apollo was assembled, put together, how people work together, the sociology of it, the culture of it, which is a major part of exploring space, is, how the groups of people work, how they assemble things, how they discuss things, how they make decisions, and that sort of stuff. So it's pretty exciting. I mean, she's still developing the course, but it's going to start next year. It'll be a great course, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it.
And hopefully that course will expand to other colleges and universities across the United States.
Yeah, let's hope people learn and go further.
Derek, do you have any closing questions for Commander Billy?
I have another question. How often do you look at the moon and sort of marvel at the fact that you were there?
That's good. I look at, actually, we go out in the backyard and look at the moon almost every night.
Wow!
and I don't really marvel that I was there, but I look at my old camping ground, if you will, and when I look at it, I say, what time of day is it now? Where are the shadows, and what was it? What's going on at Hadley Apennine? Is it nighttime, or is it noon, or sun rising and stuff like that? Because it's an old friend. It's an old friend.
The old neighborhood. The old neighborhood.
Yeah.
I know. Did you ever want to? Were you ever at a cocktail party and hear people bragging about where they've been unknowns to you, and just look up to the moon and say, want to say, "Moon, been there."
It's just, it's like, it's a comfortable thing. It's sort of like, I got to do it. It worked out really well. We're really happy about it. We got a lot of things done. It was all successful. And again, it's hard to do. It's very complicated. It takes a lot of people, a lot of smart people working together to make something like that happen. So that's the marvelous part about it. But having been there, just a great experience, and it's an old friend.
Billy, you got any closing questions for?
No, just what an honor. Just what a complete honor to meet you, sir. I just incredible. I'm overwhelmed. It was great. And you've answered one question about they're wondering what the effects going into space might have long term on psychological and acute ability. I wish I would have went, because I'm not near as on the ball as you are. So just thank you for your service, and thank you for coming on the show today. It's been a real privilege, a real honor.
Yes.
I know Frank pretty well. Great guy. Really enjoy Frank. But it's nice to meet you. Again, I enjoyed your book. I enjoy your writing. Hope you guys keep doing things that are interesting, because it's very productive and very entertaining.
Well, we've got another one coming out, so I'm going to send you and Mag also the next book, Combustible, that's loosely based on Billy's life. So I think you'll enjoy that. Speaking of Mag, is she nearby? Will she get on camera with you just to say hello?
Oh, my senior advisor.
Yes.
Yeah, my senior advisor.
There she is.
My senior advisor is here. She's helping.
The lighting isn't right for me. What can I tell you?
and your senior advisor, I have to say, was the senior most powerful woman at Morgan Stanley in New York. So power upon power. It's great to have you both. We love you, and thanks so much for appearing.
Just wonderful.
So, Frank.
Thank
Billy,
you.
Just wonderful. Just wonderful.
Thanks a lot, all.
Thank you.
Program. Well,
Great. Thank you so much.
The dogs are cheering you too.
Great. Do well.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
So, Billy, that was pretty good, huh?
Oh, Frank, unbelievable. Wow, unbelievable. Man, oh, man, oh, man. Just great. And then, you know what? I love that he told me that he got more juice as a fighter pilot than he did going to the moon. That blew me away. Just blew me away. Just fantastic.
Hang on. Can you get?
I'm trying.
Okay. Well, so David's still there. Oh God. Okay, great. So yeah, it was incredible, wasn't it?
Oh man, incredible! I mean, what this man has accomplished, and you know, just so bright, so erudite. You know, just so well read. I mean, just amazing man.
But think about it. He's 89 years old, Billy. He's 89 years old. Can you imagine how sharp he is at 89 years old?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I wish I would have went into space because I wish I was as sharp as he is today. I wish I was as sharp 30 years ago as he is today.
Can you imagine how sharp he was 60 years ago?
I don't think he's changed much, Frank. I don't think he's lost anything.
Probably
Guy's
not.
like just bing, 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 bing. And you know what? Also, when he was answering questions,
Corners.
how specific he was.
Corners.
Specific he was.
Corners.
Oh, corners. Okay, gotcha.
All right, but go ahead. Specific. Sorry to ruin your rant.
How specific he was with all of his answers. You know, like just he didn't speak in generalities at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Man, he is really sharp. He is really sharp.
Remarkable.
I mean,
Remarkable.
Yeah.
No, not for 89. He's sharp for any age.
Yeah,
He's
that's
sharp
true.
For 20.
That's true.
He's sharp for 20. Forget about 89. He's sharp. Period.
And I'm glad we got a chance to ask him some questions from our viewers. That was really nice.
Yeah. There were really good questions too. I mean, that's great that we get them. Because who wouldn't want to ask this man a question?
Oh.
You know, who gets a chance to talk to a man who's been on the moon?
I mean, think about it. There's 4 living men who've walked on the moon, and we had one of them on our little podcast.
One little podcast, huge podcast, huge. I tell you.
So
listen. Speaking of
huge
podcast,
before we do that, what do you think about the Boston mayoral race? For the first time in 200 years, Boston's not going to have an Irish mayor or an Italian mayor.
Wow, that's cool.
It's hard to believe, right? And they have it's 2 women, isn't it, running against each other?
It's 2
and both
women.
of them both of them have. Go ahead, Frank. I'm sorry.
No, both of them were born outside of the United States and moved here at an early age. I believe the Asian American woman was not born. May or may not have been born in Asia, but the second woman was born in Asia, and the mayor elect is a black woman. They looked past her. She didn't make the runoff. I don't know whether Boston racism has anything to do with that, or maybe she's just not as competent as the other 2.
You know, Frank, when I was a kid, when I was 7, 8 years old, I was always resentful that because I was born on an island that I couldn't be president of the United States. I actually thought that anybody could be president, right? Until it was actually proven over the last 12 years that yes, anybody can be president. But I actually thought I had a shot.
You have to be able to win the presidential auction.
Exactly. But I thought I had a shot. I always thought, geez, that's discriminatory. I was born on an island. They're not going to let me be president, you know, because I thought I had a shot.
There's still time.
But that's interesting. Yeah, Boston has always been a paragon of Irish politics, you know.
Or Italian. Irish or Italian.
Honey Fitz and go on from there. But yeah, the Italians too. So now it's, well, that's good. The diversity is, the country's changing. The dynamics of the country's changing. And let's face it, old white America's going to have to suck it up and realize things are changing.
Yeah, things are changing. Things are changing. Yeah. All right, so what about our football pick?
Well, let's get our football pick. First of all, I want to talk about Our book Combustible, it's out. And can I read the very first paragraph?
Can you hold it up long enough so people can see it?
How about that? Combustible.
Okay.
Wait a second. Let me pull it back a little bit. How about that? Combustible.
That's okay. Derek will put it up in
Jesus.
post.
Yeah, since you're
Derek
moving,
will
right.
put it up in post.
you're moving around like a shooting star.
Hey, I just interviewed a man who's been out to space. You know what I mean? I'm a little hyped up here.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
going to read the very first paragraph. I'm
Okay.
not going to mark it. The very first paragraph.
Okay.
Open the book, chapter 1. On this last morning of the first year of the new century, the sun was trying to crash through the thick clouds blanketing the South Bronx. Inside the five boroughs' busiest firehouse, Conical Cullen was sipping coffee and about to sink his teeth into a bagel when 3 air horn blasts shattered the silence. The house watchman's voice thundered over the intercom. Everybody goes! Truck, engine, and chief, everybody goes! Get out! Get out! Get out! 3 more deafening air horn blasts. And then it goes into the first opening scene and the first job that Conical Cullen finds himself engulfed in.
and people want to know how we write as a team. I wrote the first lead sentence, and Billy wrote the rest.
But the first sentence is the lead. That's the key.
The first sentence.
Anyway, it's a great read. I mean, I can read you the reviews in the back, but
Frank, there's no talking for you now.
There's no talking for me.
it's a real good read. So I recommend it highly.
Give me your
Not
pick.
just because I wrote it.
Give me your pick.
The pick.
Because Derek's got to get to the airport.
Oh, he does.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right, I got to pull up. Oh, Jesus.
That's okay. Take your time.
You don't have it. You don't have it. You don't know it offhand.
I had it set up on my computer, and this computer died.
What team was it? Just give me one of the teams.
You know what? I tell you, the team was Washington and Philadelphia, and I liked Philadelphia on the road against Washington, against the Skins.
Okay.
So I liked the Eagles
Okay. Eagles. Eagles on a Eagles on a road.
Wait,
against the Washington Redskins. Yes,
Is that even a game, Derek?
I don't think so. And unless
on the
I got
26th.
the 26th, Washington's playing the Bills.
Okay. All right.
But hold on. Let me give you the Eagles. Well, no, go ahead. Go give me.
Who are the Eagles playing on the 26th?
I don't want to tell you because I think I'm going to give. I'm going to give.
No,
the
Well, that's the team I'm going to pick.
No, he's going to pick the Eagles.
Oh, okay. All right.
Billy, you
Who are
got
they
to
playing?
you got to be better prepared. You got to have the freaking thing
I
in front
have
of
it.
you. You got to write it down. You got to write it down. You
The other
freaking
computer died. The other computer died. I wrote it in invisible ink.
use. Hey, you got to. Can you cut
I
to me?
wrote it in invisible
Can you cut
ink.
to me?
Yeah.
Here's the computer. Use the old-fashioned computer. You freaking
Egypt.
Egypt.
I'm Irish. You can say Egypt.
Holy
Don't say move.
shit!
Who is Philadelphia playing on the 26th?
Well, the Philadelphia Eagles are playing on the 27th, and they're playing the Cowboys.
Aha! I like Philly against the Cowboys. I'm sorry.
Where are they
Okay.
playing?
They're playing at Dallas.
Yeah, I don't have that. but
Okay.
yeah,
It's on the bottom. Who's on the bottom?
the Cowboys are on the bottom. That's home.
That means they're at home.
Okay.
Cowboys are at home.
All right.
Give me one because I'm not doing so well this year.
Okay.
You only own one.
We got the Colts against the Titans.
I can't even address that comment.
Titans against the Colts. Titans are at home.
Titans are at home. Titans against the Colts. Colts are in Indianapolis. They're suspect. They're
See, more
Colt-
info. You hear this? You hear
I'll
this?
give you the Titans, and you can have the Colts and the points. I'll take the
Yeah,
Titans.
it'll be about 5 points.
Yeah.
Titans will probably be about 5 on
Yeah.
the Colts.
Okay.
Wow, look at that. Is that the bookie talking?
Yeah.
That's a bookie talking.
That's the bookie talking. All right. With that, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of you.
Send me to the moon, Frankie. Send me to the moon.
One of these days, Alice. Bang zoom. I'm going to send it to the moon. By the way, Ralph Cramden couldn't send Alice to the moon anymore because there would be people all over him for wife battering.
Yeah, just the threat of it would be enough to get him off the air.
Yep.
I have a question, and I'll if this is off limits, then we can cut it out. But what do you guys think about the fact that he said we just cannot get it together as a country to go back to the moon.
That was kind of scary, right?
Yeah, but it's true
Yeah.
because politically we cannot get it together. The Congress will never agree in its current state to send a person back to the moon. And I'm just talking about if the Republicans are in power, the Democrats won't agree to send a person to the moon. If the Democrats are in power, the Republicans won't agree to send somebody back to the moon. We're just so divisive in this country. It's scary.
Yeah, but go ahead, Billy.
No, I was just going to say we couldn't pass a fart through a piece of gauze. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, but
Never mind passing a bill.
Okay, but we have something that is a little different than before. We have the internet, and we have greater connectivity with the people. So the people have the ability to raise the money. So this could be much like the Bezos and Branson. This could be a private venture. So I just don't.
Bezos and Branson. Bezos and Branson won't live long enough.
No, I don't mean that. I mean the people could come together. The people could come together, and
yeah, and who's going to lead them?
Me.
Yeah.
Frank will be around. Frank's going to live long enough.
With Derek's answer of me, we'll say goodnight.
Good night, Frank.
See you next week back in the studio, Billy.
That's for sure. Good night, Derek. Take care, pals. Thanks for having me on Zoom. I appreciate it.
You betcha.
Good night, brother.
Bye-bye. Before we go, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Weekend Coffee Company. Weekend Coffee Company makes great freshly roasted premium blends of coffee delivered straight to your door. So it's great coffee, and they donate 1 bag of coffee for every 10 you purchase to first responders. So please support our sponsor, Weekend Coffee Company. With that, adios, folks.
Next week's guest, CEO and founder of PRP Inc., Perry Rogers. Client list includes Shaquille O'Neal.
We'll see you next week.